Hello class, and welcome to this Rygar NES walkthrough right here on Video Games 101 by way of Let's Play with Brigands. I'm your instructor, Professor Brigands, and Rygar is a nice little Metroid kind of inspired 1987 title from Tecmo. I liken it to Metroid because there's a decent sized world and you can only explore it fully when you have certain items which we'll collect throughout the course of our playthrough to fulfill the ultimate goal of taking down the final boss of Ligar. Any Napoleon Dynamite fans out there? But I digress. We've had a number of members of the class requesting this game for quite some time now, for a few years now, so we're happy to finally be getting to this one. In terms of difficulty, if you do a bit of mindless grinding in a couple spots we're going to point out, potentially while you're not even playing, if you have a turbo controller, and a classic trick which Blaze is going to address later, then as long as you know where to go in this game is a cakewalk. I'm sort of taking this walkthrough into account when I go ahead and give Rygar on a scale of 1 to 10 a 5 out of 10. This on the frustration scale equates to throwing your controller across the room, but don't worry, will not be necessary if you're following along with this walkthrough. I'm going to show you the most efficient route to get through this game unscathed and beat it as handily as possible. As mentioned, Blaze is going to cover the items and that trick a little bit later. Gary's standing by with your boss beaters tips on taking down every single boss in this game, and Fluff is going to share a number of interesting facts about this game, including a connection to a much, much worse game in Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, but there will be time to talk about that a little bit later. For right now, let's run the intro and get into this Rygar NES walkthrough right here on Video Games 101. Right, as we begin a new game, let's take a look at the controls for the NES version of Rygar. B and A for attack and jump respectively. We can outright pause the game with select, also pause it with start, which brings up the menu screen, which has a number of things which Fluff and Blaze will talk about in just a bit. Once we get the grappling hook, we can hold up or down and press B to use it, and just movement with the D-pad. Note that you can also press B when you're in the menu screen to use a couple items which we'll get later on in the game. As we take a look now at the Briggs notes for this Rygar NES walkthrough here on Video Games 101, the keys to beating this game: first, level up early, and midway through in a couple recommended grinding spots in particular. We're going to show you the first one in just a second. Scroll enemies. This is one of those games where if there's an enemy in a tough spot just off the screen, or in general, you can just scroll them away by moving left or right and just getting them off. They will not come back in most cases. And then follow this guide for the most efficient completion route for this game. You'll find that just going into one of these openings here will let us talk to one of these hermits, giant guys sitting on these platforms looking very mystical, I suppose. They give you tips. In some cases, they give you more important things, which we'll cover a little bit later, but we're going to go to that first Briggs note very early. Make your way, don't even bother killing anyone until you get to this platform right here. And you'll find that we are adequately isolated from any enemies coming in from the left or right. And then just start stabbing to the left. We're going to speed this up. And we're going to bring in Blaze now to cover a classic tip for grinding the lazy man's way. Blaze?
It's Blaze's best year in Items Guide. Level grinding is a fact of life in some games, but a very select few allow you to grind without having to even be in the room if you know what you're doing. To do this, you'll need three things. One is obviously a game which has an area where enemies are both never-ending while simultaneously allowing you to stay in a corner where you can keep enemies in front of you. Second is a controller which is capable of turbo. For the old school hardware, we like the NES Max, which has the onboard controls. We hate the Power Glove. For the old school arcade fans, got the NES Advantage for the joystick, but allows you to toggle on and off turbo for each A and B, and then even has these dials to adjust the turbo rate. My personal favorite is an old school original NES controller paired with the NES 4-score adapter. While the main selling point was its ability to plug 4 controllers into your NES at once, I like it for its onboard turbo engagement buttons for both A and B. The last thing you'll need is some way to keep pressure on that attack button. A small weight can work, but I like a good old-fashioned rubber band. Preferably the thicker variety so you can work it around a few times and keep it taut and keep that button depressed. Once you've got your character and setup in place, just put the controller down, step back to monitor it for 30 seconds or so. If your character doesn't take any damage in that time, it's sandwich time. So go grab yourself a snack and let the controller do the hard work for you for a change. Because like I always say, work smarter, not harder.
Thank you very much, Blaze. Great tip right there. And we recommend using the Power Up spell. Blaze will come back in and talk about the spells in just a moment, but let's bring in Fluff now to talk about why we're doing this grinding, or better said, what this is affecting and improving. You can see our health going up, but Fluff, can you give us a little more context?
Sure thing, Professor. So there are 3 main stats here in Rygar: Tone, Last, and Mind. While Mind relates to the spells you can cast, which Blaze will mention in a bit, it always maxes out at 7 regardless of the number of enemies you defeat. Tone and Last, on the other hand, increase as you defeat certain enemies, with different enemies adding different amounts to each stat. Tone is essentially the strength of the attacks you can do with your disc armor, or that yo-yo looking thing that we're whipping baddies with. This starts out at 30 and maxes out at 4,095. Last is the inexplicable term, which relates to how much health you have. There are specific checkpoints which your last value must reach to give you an additional health unit. You start out at 10, then receive an extra health unit starting at 48, 96, 192, 336, 496, 992, then roughly every 1,000 until you hit 4,000, with this stat also maxing out at 4,095. Use the Lazy Gamer's hack Blaze just covered in 2 spots in particular to safely boost those stats relatively early in the game.
Thank you very much, Fluff. Yeah, we're aiming for about 500 in that last category before we move on from that first grind spot, simply because that gives us that 496 checkpoint, which Fluff just mentioned, to give us that 8th health unit, just making this game a lot more manageable, and we were focusing on those enemies in particular because they paid out both Tone and Last, which other enemies in this region do not. But anyway, we're going to climb that rope and head to Garla's, which is this more top-down perspective area right here. Just follow this route that we're covering. Be very careful around the cliffs, as you can easily fall into the water if you're not careful. That said, dying in Rygar isn't the worst thing in the world. It just restarts you at the beginning of the area that you died in. They don't take away any of your Tone or Last. Your magic will be emptied out, but we can refill that easily enough, as Blaze will talk about in just a bit. We'll talk about the spells as well in just a moment, but first, let's have him tell us about a very important item we're getting from this hermit right here.
The grappling hook. This allows you to reach areas either above or below you by holding up or down and pressing B. Some areas are hidden above or below you, so the professor will show you where to use it when necessary.
Thank you, Blaze. Yes, we'll be using it in just a moment as we're heading towards the Valley of Ralsa. As we're doing this, let's bring in Blaze to give us an overview now of the magic spells you can use here in Rygar.
Alright, let's talk about the 3 spells you can use here in Rygar. These are dependent on mind points, which you can collect using other items, but first, the Power Up. For 3 mind points, this increases the length and speed of your weapon, so you'll want to cast this as soon as possible in the game. It's worth mentioning that there's no benefit to trying to use this more than once, and one use will last you until you die. Next is Attack and Assail for 5 mind points, which allows you to hit every enemy on the screen after using it, regardless of their location, when you attack. That lasts for your next 10 attacks. And lastly, and very importantly, recovery will cost you the max number, that is 7 mind points. But in return, it will top off your health on demand, so make sure you have a full bar of mind points whenever possible for when you might need a life-saving top-off.
Thank you very much, Blaze. Very much agree on using that Power Up for your disc armor. Not a great name for that weapon, I'm sorry. We like the lore of these games and everything, but got another hermit right here. Most of them just giving you little hints here and there. Strictly speaking, it's not necessary to go into most of the doors in this game. We'll show you the ones, or point out the ones in particular, which you'll want to make sure to stop off in, but you can see this hermit is just telling us, make sure you have the grappling hook before you show up here. And that was kind of glitchy, throwing us back to that spot right there, but anyway. You'll note that the grappling hook is just a passive item. Once we have it, we can start using it by pushing up or down with B, and we'll launch that grappling hook, which we'll need right here in just a moment. Since we did all of our grinding already, we don't need to worry about these Olbises, the green guys, Olbis, and then the Maul Goblins, or the red flying guys. They're just frustrating. Make sure you get to the edges of some of those before you make that jump on those tiny little platforms there. And as we're heading into Eruga Forest here on the right, let's bring Blaze back in to talk about the enemy drops here in Rygar.
Alright, let's talk enemy drops here in Rygar. First, we have the single star. Each one of these you pick up increases your mind points by 1. I already talked about mind points and their importance in keeping you alive, so make sure that you have them topped off whenever possible by picking these up. Next we have, in the same vein, the double star pickup. And in the world of Rygar, where math and numbers make no sense, this is worth 3 mind points. And lastly, we have the potion, which will restore 1 health when you pick one of these up.
That's true, thank you Blaze. We talk about Brigands math on our sister channel, Let's Play with Brigands, but this is Rygar math. And there, we're using that Briggs note to scroll that enemy off the screen so we don't have to worry about his projectiles. Not the most dangerous instance, obviously, but... So, we can use our grappling hook right here. A lot of times it's pretty straightforward where you need to use it when you find yourself at a dead end with no other options and you're thinking, well, what the heck is going on here? Sometimes it's a little sneaky. You need to use the grappling hook beneath you, but in that case it was just going straight up to get to that next branch and continue on here in the Eruga Forest. As we're coming up on the first boss of this game here in Rygar, let's go to our resident boss expert Gary for the first time today to give us tips on the boss of Eruga's Forest, fittingly named Eruga. Gary?
It's Scary Gary's Boss Beaters.
Alright, most of the bosses in Rygar aren't too difficult. This starts off with Eruga. The strategy, just get as many hits in early as you can. Usually the strategy with a lot of these bosses, back up and then gap the top and the middle shots the boss sends your way. Return and just fire away.
Simple as, thank you very much, Gary. And for our efforts, we meet our first god, Indora, to give us a pulley. Blaze, what do you got?
The line pulley, this allows you to travel across existing lines of rope. Just make sure you line it up right, like the professor shows, otherwise you'll fall to your death.
Thank you, Blaze. Yes, that is true. We will show you that, as we need to use one right at the bottom of this area. It's all about walking up with confidence, but right about your arm level. You'll see right here. There you go. Right around that midsection / arm level, and just walk across. It'll automatically connect, and you'll go across the gap here. Back in Garlaz, as we are heading to Mount Primevil now. It's only accessible by way of a little bit of an island here, which we can only access from this line right there. It's going to be on just the other side of this wall here. Similar looking area, only with a door at the very top. This will take us to Mount Primevil and on to the next boss, ultimately. Again, since we put in all the work earlier, we're still in pretty good shape. We're going to stop off one last time in the next area, and you can see right here, we just automatically don't have to worry about lining anything up when we're back in this straight 2D environment. Right here, just approach the posts and go right across. This is a straight shot left to right here. on Mount Primevil. Wonder what the real estate market is like here on Mount Primevil. It's a fun name. So we head inside. We are now in Sagila's Cave, or Sagila's Cave, however you want to pronounce this. And ultimately this will be our next grinding point here in Rygar. Got one last great spot to really exploit the hack which Blaze mentioned earlier. Might need to use that restorative spell in just a moment. Let's just use it since we're maxed out at our magic at this moment. You can see these little stones one off above these little gaps. Those are opportunities where you can drop down with your grappling hook, but we're going to go straight across, left to right here. This takes us outside of the cave, or we'll just have a little throughway connecting area as we're treated to a very nice shot of the sunset behind the mountains of Mount Primevil, I suppose. Is that redundant? The mountains of Mount Primevil? I don't know. But back into the caves once again, this time from the right side. And we're going to go ahead and use our grappling hook right here. Just hold down and press B. And then over on this left section is an opportunity where we can once again grind. No enemies can come up on us from that left side, and we're just gonna go ahead and knock out wave after wave of these Sun Yugi type creatures right here. And just post up, and while we're doing this and doing a bit more of the automated grinding with that rubber band trick like Blaze mentioned earlier, let's go to Fluff for a Fluff fact about Rygar.
Rygar is a 1987 loose NES adaptation of the previous year's arcade game of the same name from its developer Tecmo. The plot is similar between the two versions of the game, with the titular hero Rygar, depicted as a more cartoonish child in the Japanese Famicom covers versus the NES cover, arises from his grave to use his disc armor weapon to defeat the evil being Ligar, who has taken over the land of Argul and ultimately restore the door to peace which was established by the 5 legendary Indora gods. As the professor mentioned in opening, the game received loose comparisons with Metroid due to its approach to gameplay with regards to non-linear exploration and item collecting, and is a bit of a gem amongst those familiar with this solid action platformer from Tecmo, which has sold over 1.5 million units between its many versions, including modern ports and remakes.
Thank you, Fluff, and we'll just skip ahead here, and we're going to shoot for about 2,000 in both of those categories, mostly the last number right there, so we can get up to, I guess at this point, 10 health units by hitting that 2,000 threshold, roughly 2,000. It's in pretty good shape now. Entirely optional if you want to do that. You don't have to stop off there. Very late in the game, in the final stretch, we'll be dealing with much more lucrative enemies, which we can't get away with doing the trick on, but they'll help us hit those maxed out stats pretty handily because how much they pay out. So if you want to hold off until then, stick with the 8 health units which we had from earlier, from that initial grinding. That's your business. But again, if you do have the opportunity to do the automated trick, as Blaze mentioned, why not? It's a good spot to do it right there. Might need to tape down that down button too to allow yourself to duck, but again, your call as we are taking on the next boss, Scary.
Boss beater.
Alright, Sagila, your attacks will reverse their movements. Basically just move to the other side and attack again like we show. Repeat this process, you'll take them down.
Thank you, Gary. And just a reminder, as always, the attack and assail is always on the table as an option, but that way you don't have to actually aim or use any strategy. But yeah, we like to give Gary his due credit in showing us techniques which don't rely heavily on that strategy. I think we will get a mention of that on the final boss, but I digress. Blaze, what did we just pick up?
The crossbow allows you to make a line of rope between posts in certain areas which don't already have it there, which the professor will point out.
Yep, kind of like the hook shot, only not nearly as cool. Thank you very much, Blaze. Of course, that's not a slight to the crossbow in this game. Very few items in the history of video gaming are anywhere near as cool as the hook shot. I think we can all agree on that. But anyway, we're backtracking a little bit. This time when we go across this section, we're going to head north, back here in Garlaz. Just follow this path around. Now that we've got the crossbow and the grappling hook, of course, we'll be using both of these in the next area of Ragua Sando, and then ultimately Lapis from there, which we're going to access through the central hub of the game in a lot of ways, that is Garlaz. You see these little turtle-type creatures, the Hyokings that go by there. Easy enough to defeat. Just go down with one hit. When you've got your tone decently leveled. Doesn't even have to be decently leveled. Where we were earlier in the game with just 500 would have done just fine, but cut through here to get yourself to a very brief cut-through area. It is Ragua Sando. Just a connecting area here to serve as the entrance to Lapis. No new threats. We're just climbing up this rope, and the entrance is going to be built into the mountain right here with this door. So lots of floating platforms here. Got a new type of enemy called the Heavy Soldier Bargan. Robot-looking guys, which we'll see in a second. You can go up there to talk to a hermit, but it's unnecessary. What we want to do is use our grappling hook right here. And then we'll use our crossbow just automatically once we get to the post here. And it just creates this little connecting point for us. Yeah, I don't know how to explain the geography, the geology, some combination. A lot of geos at play, and you'll see right here, you can't get all the way down. There is a maximum to the grappling hook's range, so in case you were thinking, can you just use this at any point to climb up or down? No, there is a limit. Good advice. Remind me to hire you as a TA. That guy had a hidden door. You'll find that sometimes, the kind of illusionary doors which just pop up later, seemingly through a glitch. But yeah, I don't know how you explain away what's holding these platforms up. Just some sort of magic as we drop down here. Or a popular theory I always had was that they extending very far into the distance behind these platforms that you can't see. There's a mountain in the distance you can't even see that it's connected to. However you want to explain it, that's fine, but we don't need to do any grinding here, don't need to stop off. You'll notice, if you do that bit of grinding, you can very easily just cut through basically 90% of the game without having to acknowledge most of the enemies. That guy tips you off that you do need to climb down there, go as far to the right as possible, otherwise he'll just be hovering over a gap there with nothing to touch down on. He can't swing left or right after he goes down on that grappling hook, unfortunately. And seemingly some grass or something in the background there. Anyway, pop in here. Next boss, Gary.
Boss beaters.
Alright, Belzar, nothing sneaky here. Just climb up on the right side and start and finish your attacks very quickly to take down this boss.
Yeah, admittedly, the bosses would be more of a challenge, probably. Well, one, if they faced us to attack us. I think given time, that would have been more challenging, but if we hadn't gone ahead and put in the time, getting the reps to get that tone up. But the coat of arms, Blaze?
The coat of arms exclusively exists here in Rygar to prove that you've got good vibes to the local hermits. Once you have this, you can get medicine from certain hermits later on in the game, which the professor will mention and talk about later.
Yeah, the medicine is nice to have in your back pocket, certain stretches later on in the game. We'll grab some in just a moment. I want to mention too, when you're moving around, navigating Garlaz, as we are right now to move on to our next area, and do some backtracking here actually, but you'll find that when you're moving around, it's helpful to jump so that you can actually move diagonally. Otherwise, you're stuck moving left, right, up, down, just main directions. But when you're in the air, they give you that little float option so that you can avoid enemies or just corner things a little bit easier to move around a bit more efficiently. So we're going back to that little kind of cut-off island where Mount Primevil was earlier. There we go. We found it. And this is going to take us to our next area, but this time we're going to head up instead of left to get on the north side of the island. Follow this around. You can see we're using our jump to kind of diagonally take these corners a little more efficiently, as mentioned. And you'll find that there are these posts here in Garlaz, just as they were in the strict side-scrolling 2D environments. Just gotta find the right spot, and this will automatically connect for you, and then crossing it, just line yourself up right in the middle, and then get to this tiny little island, which will take us to Dorago's palace. And from first glance, this kind of reminds me of Fester's Quest a little bit, for those familiar with that game. Game which we did a class on. One of our earliest classes here on Video Games 101. But it has that kind of sewer vibe, the looks of it. If you're familiar with that game, you'll probably see what I'm talking about. But yeah, for the most part, this is a very linear area, but we're just showing you the quickest way to cut through here and get to Dorago. This is their palace. Obviously, they are in charge here. They are the boss of this area. Before we head to the left where we ultimately want to go, since we have that coat of arms which Blaze mentioned earlier, we now have the medicine which Blaze mentioned earlier. So Blaze, can you tell us a bit more about the medicine?
As I mentioned earlier, once you have the coat of arms, some hermits will give you the medicine, which will top off your health. Note that the medicine is a usable item, meaning you need to go into your inventory and click on it with B to actually use it.
Thank you, Blaze. Yes, very important distinction to make there. Don't expect that to just kick in like having a fairy Zelda style. You do actually have to go in and use that one of two items which you can use in your inventory on demand, and probably the only one that really matters. There's another one which we use one time very late in the game, but which we're not that far off from at this point, honestly. But still following this track around here in Dorago's palace. If we had gone north up there at that little break, we would have just gotten some more unnecessary information from one of the many hermits in this game. Look a lot like the gods, I have to be honest, but the distinction is they don't have that kind of third eye right there in the middle of their head. In case you were curious, that's in terms of an animation perspective, that is how they differ. And just cut up north through here, taking down any of the Knobles that you see, little tree-looking guys. And next boss, I'm guessing I know the name of this one. Gary?
Boss beaters.
Right, Dorago. Just keep your max weapon distance to give yourself more time to maneuver. Just get a couple attacks in and just jump over the projectiles side to side like we show. Repeat those last two steps. You'll take him down pretty quick.
Thank you, Gary. And just got the Indora's suit of armor. Blaze, what does that do for us?
Right, Indora's suit of armor. This armor increases your defense slightly. It's not much, but at least it doesn't make you weaker, like a certain item I covered in our recent class on Fazanadu.
That's true. Thank you very much, Blaze. You can check out our class on Fazanadu via the playlist in the description. Every single class we have ever done here on Video Games 101 is covered as part of that playlist, but we're now backtracking all the way back to the original start of the game, through Garlaz, and then ultimately back to the Grand Mountains, almost back to the very original starting point. But you'll remember when we took the doorway into Garlaz that there were other areas, just pretty much right around that area where we did that initial grinding session. But as we return there, let's get another fluff fact about Rygar with our resident fact finder, Fluff.
In the original Japanese arcade game, the titular character of Rygar as we know him was actually simply referred to as the Legendary Warrior. Interestingly enough, the final boss of Ligar was also referred to as Rygar in this version because the Roman symbols of Rai and Lai each come from the same Japanese character, so there's no discernible difference between the two, and when the game was localized in English, the villain retained his name of Ligar, but the hero was purportedly mistakenly named Rygar, and the rest is history.
Thank you very much, Fluff. So back here at the Grand Mountains, we are now going all the way up and using our crossbow to access an area we could not at the start of the game. And once more here. And ultimately this is going to take us to the tower, which is a straight up shot to take on another boss and get ourselves a very important item which we can only access the final area of the game if we have it, so. But again, Blaze will talk about that. Sort of feels like a mini boss rush here in leading up to the boss of this area, Deathpigor. Where they come up with some of these names. Some make more sense than others, obviously. You know, the guy who owned the palace we were just attacking. That makes sense, but you gotta take out these giant snail-like enemies to gain access to the next area. Kuzilars, they're called, and this guy's just having a good time. I hate to kill him, but we need to destroy this Demoro Bruiser in order to get this next rope and continue on here. And next boss, Gary?
Boss beaters.
Alright, the Deathpigor. Get a few attacks in, retreat, jump over their attacks, move back in, attack, take them down.
Definitely not necessary when you've got the kind of attack power and health that we had right there. You probably don't need to, regardless of your level, just pound some of that medicine should you need to. That's a generous interpretation of being on that rope right there, but anyway, just got a very important item. Blaze, what do we pick up?
Alright, the Flute of Pegasus. This item is just necessary to be used in the right spot, the professor will point out, to access the floating castle and the final stretch of this game.
Thank you, Blaze. Yeah, the Flute of Pegasus, kind of, it's like a marriage of Legend of Zelda and Battle of Olympus, a game which we oftentimes liken to The Legend of Zelda. We had I think it was the harp which called in Pegasus in that game, but anyway, so we're going to head back to Garlaz one last time, as we are ultimately headed to the Sky Castle. To get there, we're going to backtrack back to the Valley of Ralsa, one of the first places we came to, back when we reached Garlaz initially. Just take that shortcut across with the line. Climb these stairs right here and head back to the valley, once you line it up, of course. And we basically passed where we're going to be climbing up this time before because we didn't have what we needed to access the Sky Castle. But now that we have the Flute of Pegasus, let's climb up this rope right here. And this will seem familiar right here, but now we can climb up, since we also have the grappling hook, and then go up one more. And just keep going vertical here. One more time. And you'll find there's one more hermit right there in that door, which we can visit. And they'll just essentially tell us that if we want to go up any higher, we'll need all the stuff. But we have all the stuff. So let's go into our inventory and hit B on that Flute of Pegasus, and a rope and a door will appear, and we are now at the castle. This is the final area of the game. There's an opportunity for one more medicine should you need it. This is actually a good place to do that final grinding, which I referenced earlier. Some of the most powerful enemies in the game come in the form of 3 different types of shadow beast, as they're called, for obvious reasons once you see one. Kind of ridiculous we have to go all the way around the outside of the castle, the outer walls to get inside. Bit of a mini maze once you do get inside of the sky castle here, but go right one screen as well, as the walls kind of come out right here before we finally get a door allowing us access to the inner walls of the castle. You'd think they'd have some defenses on the outside, but couldn't be bothered. But here's one of those shadow beasts right there, the ones that go left and right. These guys pay out 14 in tone, but 46 in the last category. This guy in particular, this is kind of the guy that looks like he has wings, and make sure you use that medicine should you need to by hitting B before you get killed by one of these guys. But yeah, these shadow beasts that look like they have wings and they're taller than the rest of them, these ones pay out 147 tone and last across the board. So these are the guys you want to take down to very quickly reach that final cutoff point, or the final last upgrade of 4,000 points. Again, note that the max is 4095. We get that last one at 4,000, that last hit point. So it's kind of a broken mechanism in that these guys pay out more than you can probably hold in some cases. So if you kill a bunch of these guys and you're looking at your stats, which you can again check by hitting start, and you'll see, well, I'm at 4,000, or I'm at maybe 3,990, and I'm killing these guys and nothing's happening. It won't go up from there because 147 is greater than that 4095. That would try to exceed that. So it just kind of hits a barrier and keeps you at that 3990, or for argument's sake, that point. So you need to kill one of these lesser guys that pay out less, and that's why we have the other shadow beasts hanging around. But all right, we're playing a little loose there. Come down here when you need to. This hermit will top you off, but also more importantly, you'll get yourself the medicine so that you can use that on demand and do this last little bit of grinding, which we're going to do now by returning to that powerful shadow beast and just grinding on them for a little bit. Context, class. And while we're doing this, let's go back to Fluff one last time for one final Fluff fact about Rygar.
Eagle-eared members of the class might recognize the music which plays when you visit the Hermits of Rygar as being the same theme which plays on the title screen of the oft and deservedly ridiculed Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, albeit in a different key. The theme was composed by Tecmo's composer of the mid-80s, Michiharu Hasuya, who began his game composing career with Tecmo in 1986's Solomon's Key and racked up half a dozen credits or so before moving to another game company and frequent collaborator of Tecmo in the mid-80s, Vic Tokai, where he worked in part in a gun-for-hire role, including when he worked with Advanced Communication Company, the people who made Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, which I mentioned in our recent class on it here on Video Games 101, which you can check out via the playlist in the description. Hasuya is best known for his soundtracks for Clash at Demon Head, Golgo 13, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and of course Rygar, before he retired from the gaming industry in the mid-90s. Rygar preceded Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde by a year, and I'm willing to bet he plagiarized himself with the title theme for the latter upon realizing everyone else at ACC was phoning it in when they made Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and I can't fault him one bit for it.
Thank you, Fluff. Yes, as we showed in the intro, still the best part of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, if you ask me. But there you go. So once you've gotten that last hit point, as we have here, maxed out your stats, then we're going to return one last time to make sure that our health is topped off, that we have the medicine. Now we're going to head back outside and take the proper route, the inner walls of the Sky Castle here. To reach it, we're going to go back to that kind of four-way nexus point here and take the left side this time. Up would just be a dead end. And it's pretty linear from here out. Use our crossbow to jump across these gaps here, using all the tools we have at our disposal. A couple shadow beasts will be guarding the remaining stretches here, so just ignore them obviously at this point. We don't need any more stats, buffed up from these guys. Just want to preserve as much health as possible, even though, strictly speaking, it's not a big deal between Gary's strategy and just the fact that we're a beast at this point. Not a shadow beast, an actual beast that can defeat this final boss quite handily, regardless of the strategy we use, but we'll see what Gary says. Nonetheless, a couple more gaps to clear here. A couple more of these just look like football players. Just linebackers doing drills in the off-season, trying to get their respective last and tones up. But I digress. Gary, take us home.
Boss beaters.
I'm trying my best not to reference the Pulley and Dynamite any more than I just did, but keep your maximum distance and attack as you thread that needle from those shots. Or, if you want to do it the cheap way, but you've earned it, go ahead and use the attack and assail, and just hit them from the left side of the room so you have more room to maneuver. Don't even have to get close, but if you're maxed out like the professor has recommended, 9 hits will take him down, and you have beaten Rygar. Congratulations.
Yeah, the distance method there makes it laughably simple. Excellent work today to all my TAs, by the way. And we get this. Just read the manual for more context, but I think we can agree. Doves and rainbows and peace, all good things, I suppose. I guess that's the method. The door of peace was opened, and peace did again come to Argul. People missing some punctuation there, I suppose. Come to Argul. People regained their smiling faces. The warrior who finished his fight returned to Argus. The warrior of Argus. You are really a true hero. End. Not the best ending, but certainly not the worst amongst the NES library. But that's our time for this week. If you haven't already done so, please consider subscribing to enroll in these classes. We do one of these classes every single week in the same spot. We'd love to have you enrolled. Click that like button too if you don't mind. It really does help us out to make future classes for you. And leave a comment. As I said, a lot of people were requesting this game. What are your thoughts and or memories here of Rygar? But we'll see you next week in the same spot for next week's class, right here on Video Games 101. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and comment on this video, and click subscribe if you haven't already, as this seriously helps me to keep making great content for you. And check the description of this video to see what song is playing right now.